Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Daily Friends Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer. Thank you very much to Sargon for hosting in my absence. I'm unfortunately still a bit sick, but we have to go on. And so today I'm joined by Mr. Gabriel Crouse. Gabriel, how are you doing?
Oh, Nick, it's so good to have you back. I really enjoyed some of the comments while you were away. One of the commentators who described you as her boyfriend wanted to bring you soup and good wishes. And it made me very happy to know that we're part of such a loving community.
Wonderful. And of course, we're also joined by Mr. Sholan Booysen. Sholan, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Nick. I'm excited to be on the show today, especially with yourself and Gabriel. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. So there's no electricity. I'm still feeling sick. It's cold and I'm wearing slippers. It's time to rock and roll for liberty in good sense. Okay. First topic for today. Gabriel, you've had some musings about racial quotas and what they're doing. And you suggested to me that perhaps what we should lead with is the story that simply firing white men is not really enough, is it?
It's not enough, Nick. Or maybe it is enough, but it's not happening enough. So I don't know how many people who watch the show also read the Commission for Employment Equity annual reports. But these reports are stunning demonstrations, if anyone had any doubt, of what the National Democratic Revolution means in practice. Our senior colleague and most esteemed Dr. Anthea Jeffrey has been writing about the National Democratic Revolution and tracking it for many decades. It's basically what I was taught in high school as an idea of the ANC. Sorry, I'll mute my phone. An idea of the ANC during the struggle against apartheid, which some had said had gone away. The idea is, first you get democracy with a bit of capitalism, then you start taking away a bit of the capitalism, and eventually you hit utopia. Once you've taken it all away, democracy can go away as well. So the Commission for Employment Equity is one of the oversight bodies to make sure that BEE is working or not working, in any event to make sure that it's getting harsher, because that is the second step of the National Democratic Revolution. And one of the things that it always does, and the one that was released last week is no exception, is to complain about how BEE is not working and then say we need more BEE, that's the solution. And as usual, one of the foremost complaints is that in top levels of management, there are too many white people. And they want everything to be demographically representative. So there's a bit of a problem, because in top levels of management at provincial and local levels of government, black males are overrepresented. And according to the policy of the CEE and of the Department of Labor and Employment and of Trade and Industry, where there is a sector where there's overrepresentation by anyone, you're supposed to block them from being employed. So black males, theoretically, there should be a sign in front of top-level management appointment positions for provincial and local government saying no black men allowed. Maybe no blacks allowed at all, but certainly no black men allowed. I'd like to see someone put up that sign so that it could be taken down, because it would expose yet again how stupid the system is that we live in. But the highest, I just poured some of the numbers into an Excel spreadsheet to see what is the biggest, where's the most disproportionate representation. And as far as I could tell, it's the rate at which white people are being terminated, and especially white males, by an order of magnitude. So white males are like 4 or 5% of the economically active population, but they make up about 50%, 40 to 50% of those who get terminated from senior positions, from top-level management positions every year. And they're not being replaced by white people overall. Obviously, some new appointments are white people, but there the number's much lower. So this struck me as curious. Like, maybe Jurgs can help me understand. We're living in a world where that should be a victory, right? Why aren't they celebrating? I don't quite understand why the chairperson to Beer is not celebrating more openly the fact that white men are being terminated. But my starting hypothesis, because of everything else that's said in the report, is that it's not that they don't think it's a good thing. They think it's a really, really very good thing. It's just that not enough are being terminated. The number needs to go from 40, 50% to 90, 100%. If you could fire 90% of white men, then that would be much better. And that's exactly one of the things that the Employment Equity Amendment Bill aims to do. And the big news on that, I mean, we've been campaigning against that for over a year now. As you know, went to the union buildings the other day with tens of thousands of signatures opposing it. But the deadline for Ramaphosa to sign it, to make it possible to really force the kind of public sector race quotas that have achieved relatively demographic representative results in organs of state that are completely letting down people in general and especially the poor, to take that power and put it into the private sector is expected to happen now at the latest in September. And this is off the back of Minister Thulas Nxesi's comments, saying that he's getting ready to put those quotas in September, to put those race targets, as he put it, in September, after Ramaphosa is expected to sign. So there's a funny side to this. There's also a very serious side to this. But the kind of tragic comic question is, you know, if your goal is to get more white people terminated, and half of them are being terminated every year at top management level, why can't we hear the ululation? Is it the case that actually those leaders know that most South Africans are not into it and just don't think that that's a flippin' smart way to go about things?
So, Gabriel, a question just to you after the chat is, does termination include resigning or retiring in the data you're talking about?
Indeed, I believe it does. So one would think that without employment equity policies, whites would be overrepresented to some extent because they're overrepresented already. And so, but as far as I could tell, those ratios do not line up. In other words, it's more than what you would expect just from a natural attrition.
So, Sholan, what do you make of all this? I was saying before the show, it's incredible to me, excuse me, how affirmative action, BE, these policies are so incredibly ineffective. They have these negative consequences. They increase racial divisions. They have been used as a cover for things like corruption and incompetence and stuff like that. But then also, they seem to fail in achieving their objectives, which in a lot of cases is inserting, particularly in the private sector, black people into senior management positions. What do you make of Gabriel's hypothesis and BE in general, Joe?
Yeah, so definitely my thoughts on race quotas, Nick. I'm sure yourself and Gabriel know at this point that I don't think race quotas are necessarily helpful. And mind you that the majority of South Africans have the same view that racial quotas are ineffective and they don't actually help us with real problems. And because the thing is, I don't care about the race of the individual. It's more important whether or not they get the job done. And personally, for me, I don't think there's anything more insulting than being told that, you know what, we're going to take this job away from a white person and then give it to a person with a darker skin color. And that is extremely insulting to me, because I think that an opportunity or a job should be given to you based on your skills and your abilities, your ideas, and what you are able to actually bring to the table. So telling people that they are receiving opportunities only based on skin color is not an incentive, because then I would actually ask you, so then what should I do to get a promotion? Should I be darker then? Do I need a tan? Is that what they are busy telling me? Because firstly, I got the job not based on my skills, so then I have no reason to actually hard work or improve myself in that case. So I really don't think that incentivizes people to actually participate in the work that they do. And Nick, something you mentioned actually earlier, I think in one of our private conversations, was that even if you take away all of the jobs from every white person in South Africa, there would still not be enough jobs to give to all of the black people living in this country, or people of color in this country. And that's why I think it's really ineffective way of managing the economy or solving unemployment in this country, because we don't need the jobs that white people have. We need jobs to be created. That's essentially the thing. We need more jobs. We don't just need the jobs that are currently there, and we need to be upskilled. We need to be educated efficiently. Those are issues that we actually need to tackle. And as the research done by the Institute of Race Relations has shown constantly that people really do not want things like BE or race quotas in any form. We actually want jobs to be created in a proper manner in this country. Yeah.
So, Gabriel, another thing that you were talking about to me before the show is this thing of quotas for white men. We've seen some great examples of this happen before, like I think it was a volleyball team in Mpumalanga, which had too many black players on the court and so wasn't allowed to progress in a championship game despite winning. Do you have any final thoughts on this topic before we move on? I think Gabriel can't hear us. Yeah, no, I think we've lost the signal. All right, while we get him back, we will move on to the next topic. And so, hold
on. I seem to have been knocked.
Gabriel, are you back? Nope. Okay.
Yes, I can hear you. Right, I'm not coming through very clearly, I'm afraid. I got.
Yeah, you're a bit delayed there. Can you hear me now?
Okay, I can hear you. Shall I? You interrupt me. I'm going to try and go ahead with just saying the thing about pro-white quotas and how stupid and terrible an idea that is, but also how that idea is progressing. Nicholas is right. There was the silly volleyball thing. There was also a comment coming from a soccer coach who's South African, based in Egypt, saying that there's not enough white soccer players for Bafana. And that got me thinking again about this whole topic. And actually how serious it is. So in 2014, the Constitutional Court ruled in the case of Renata Barnard that in the public sector, it can be better to keep a job open, vacant, no one doing anything, than to appoint the wrong person of the wrong race, explicitly on the basis of race. In that instance, the issue was that Barnard was white, woman, and there was no more room for white women, even though not appointing her meant that the job would just stay vacant in the police force. The best part of it was in the complaints department of the police force, and the person who made the decision was Jackie Salibi. So yeah, he was like, I can't see why anyone would want to complain. Doesn't matter if you just leave that open. Too many white women that are superintendents in the police. Okay, so that was obviously a terrible decision, but the Constitutional Court upheld it and set up what it calls the Barnard principle, which is that it can be justified to openly stop someone from getting a job in the public sector on the basis of race, exclusively on the basis of race. Now, the scary thing to me about the EEB bill, the one that's forthcoming, the one that we're campaigning against, is it will let Tulas and Klesi do the same thing in the private sector, across the private sector, for 90% of the jobs in the private sector. So it's a nightmare. It's a real nightmare. That it's so hard for me to get through to mainstream versus the Department of Correctional Services. About a dozen colored people were denied promotion as prison wardens, explicitly on the basis that they were colored, and there were too many colored people, according to the government, in the Department of Correctional Services. So It's the same kind of logic. And what the Constitutional Court said is that in principle, the Barnard principle can be applied against colored people or against Indian people or against black people. Which brings me back to the beginning. I mean, in theory, the fact that 50% of provincial top managers in government and local government top managers are black males could be used, according to the Constitutional Court, as a reason to say no blacks allowed. And we have seen something like this, not just in sport. We've also seen something like this at the Cape Bar and in the Johannesburg Bar, where race quota systems were used to see who would be elevated at the bar. And those ended up discriminating directly against black females who are, as it were, underrepresented in so many aspects of society, but are doing really well in the law at the bar. But the quotas explicitly held them back. So yeah, I mean, I think there are many arguments against race quotas that are about the meat and potato issues of how this country fails to perform well when we have the zero-sum game mentality, which is what Sholan was speaking about. You can't cut the pie up in a different way. There's not enough pie. You need to grow the pie. But at the same time, even for people who are mentally arrested inside of a race nationalist mentality and a socialist mentality, where they don't believe in growth and they don't believe in citizenship or human rights, they just believe in serving their own race. Whatever race you are, the world is one in which all are exposed to government social engineering projects through direct exclusion. I mean, ni blancus, you can put the sign, ni blancus, clearling India, on the doors of employment and doing business with government. It really is like that.
Yeah, no, it's just more examples of the utterly failed framework under which we've been trying to transform the country, and I think it's well past time we abandoned race quotas. But anyway, let us continue on to our next story, and this is a statement from Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, used to be the Health Minister. And it's pretty wild. So we did talk last week about the Helen Suzman Foundation and how the Helen Suzman Foundation is taking the minister to court over his decision to cancel the Zimbabwe exemption permits, the ZEPs, which are very important for lots of Zimbabwean migrant workers who are working here legally. Now, the Helen Suzman Foundation has taken the minister to court, saying that the decision that he made, while it's within his power, was taken irrationally and therefore shouldn't go ahead. The minister has responded to the Helen Suzman Foundation taking him to court with this statement, which I think is interesting because of just the language that's used in the statement. So he starts off by saying, it's just a weird statement because it's written in like bullet points, but it's also like a paragraph. Anyway, in an open and transparent democracy, organs of civil society have an important role to play. Most of the times, they do so in the national interest. However, at times, some of them can be a stumbling block in the implementation of government's rational and lawful decisions, which are in the national interest. The minister went on to say, in a surprising recent court action launched by the Helen Suzman Foundation is a perfect example of the destructive role that some non-governmental organizations are capable of. The Minister of Home Affairs has always engaged the Helen Suzman Foundation regarding some of the challenges faced by the department in the past. The minister has engaged with Helen Suzman Foundation on several occasions with positive outcomes. Since the announcement of the decision of the minister not to extend the exemption granted to Zimbabwean nationals, he has engaged with several members of civil society with a view to manage the consequences of his decision collectively. This time around, the Helen Suzman Foundation was conspicuous by its silence. Little did the minister know that the Helen Suzman Foundation was behind the scenes planning a so-called public interest court action. There's a disturbing and growing trend by some NGOs to sabotage the polycentric and policy-laden decisions taken by government by using the courts. This development must be nipped in the bud as soon as possible. The Helen Suzman Foundation's access to the courts is guaranteed in the Constitution. However, this should not be a license to abuse the Bill of Rights by some armchair critics who have no idea of the sacrifices and deaths of many freedom fighters while they sat in the comfort of their homes because of the color of their skin. They can now claim to be champions of the human rights of African people in the whole continent. The minister calls on all affected Zimbabwean nationals to ignore the false hope created by the Helen Suzman Foundation and adhere to the procedures outlined by the department in various public notices communications. So, Gabriel, let me start with you. This is, I don't know, this is strange.
Yeah, it's pretty odd. I mean, it sort of reminds me, last year I did a briefing with the Government Communication Information Service, which was great in a lot of ways. We got a lot of media time out of that on national radio and television stations. But a couple of those panels ended up, I shared panel time with a government official from the Departments of Arts and Culture or something, I can't remember, who said the Institute of Race Relations should not be allowed to exist. They go around and ask people, do you prefer education vouchers or do you prefer BEE? How can we allow them to ask people such questions? And then after they've asked the questions, they even publish it on the internet. We must stop this now, he said. This is outrageous. The people must be thrown in jail. He was very, very scandalized that a civil society organization would go and ask questions and then report the answers because it didn't suit his narrative. I think part of what's surprising about this case is that Mr. Motsoaledi is, I don't think, bears the reputation of making such obviously tin pot.
Right, he's not an obvious hothead like you'd expect this from Fikile and Balula.
Yes, or Panyaza Lesufi, but I'm jumping ahead of the queue here. Anyway, I think that one of our colleagues said that it bears the horn. In fact, I'll say it, Michael Morris said that it reminded him a little bit of the kind of desperate tone that some government officials started taking in the days of P.W. Botha. That there was a sense of the writing was so obviously on the wall that the incumbents' days were numbered, that the electorate had turned against the ideology ruling the day. That people who had previously seemed cool, calm, and collected suddenly seemed like high schoolers losing the plot and desperately trying to win a debate by thumping the table and so on. Anyway, so in that sense, I think it's one of many worrying signs that are going to accumulate of ANC desperation. And on the side of the Helen Suzman Foundation, I'm always delighted when they're doing something. And I think all civil society organizations, in a sense, have the role of being the gadfly, stinging the rear hind of the large gargantuan ox or buffalo that eats the little grass, trying to irritate it into a new and better direction. That is a metaphor as ancient Greece, and very much one that sits on my mind when I think of the buffalo and the wild dogs metaphor that's been so successfully mainstreamed by John Endres, our CEO.
So, Sholan, what do you make of the comments by that government official that Gabriel talked about? He says that the IRR should be abolished because we ask these outrageous questions. What are your thoughts on civil society?
Yeah, no, so for sure. I think that it's rather disturbing that I know that was a government official speaking to Gabriel, but when a minister is the one that's currently saying, especially the Home Affairs Minister, kind of one saying that, what NGOs are trying to sabotage and they are disturbing, government processes by going to the courts. I think that's a very dangerous direction we are definitely going into, and I definitely think that they understand, as Gabriel said, that the writing is on the wall. They know that the end is clearly coming, and in any democratic society or pluralist society we find ourselves in, civil society is an instrumental part in not only keeping government accountable, which the Helen Suzman Foundation is clearly doing to the Home Affairs department right now, but civil society is also important for, stepping into government failures. So I really hope that Motsoaledi would really have the same disdain and energy as for civil society organizations, I hope you would have that same type of energy for the very people in his party who are clearly, the ones actually causing the sabotage in this country. So yeah, I hope he can continue that same energy, for sure.
Oh, well said. Yeah, it's. I do agree completely with that sentiment that you said that Michael had about how this really shows that there's kind of a nervousness in government. I mean, this is not something, if he's so obviously correct in the courts, then he shouldn't need to do a public attack by this because he's going to win the court battle. And this is just, it lowers the tone of our public debates. It's dangerous because you start to then define organizations that are disagreeing correctly through democratic and legal procedures as enemies and traitors, and it goes down a very dark road. Regardless of what you think of the Helen Suzman Foundation's court challenge, this is a ridiculous thing, I think, for the minister to say. Any final thoughts on that one, Gabriel, before we move on?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I do think that there are question marks I have around their court challenge. But I'll leave that for another day. I think that the response is the news. And saying that a court challenge is an act of dictatorship is absurd. And I'll just add, my final thought is that Lindiwe Sisulu at the start of the year wrote that awful screed where she basically described Black people on the Constitutional Court benches and the Supreme Court of Appeals benches and so on as being mentally colonized. And I maintain that the major distinction, people talk about the RET faction and there's this faction. I say Ramaphosa is the head of the RET faction because he championed their major policies, being expropriation without compensation, national health insurance, prescribed assets, etc., etc. The world's stupidest minimum wage law, or the best minimum wage law at keeping unemployment levels above 50% for youth and so on. That's all Ramaphosa. But I do think that there is one ideological distinction worth noting in the ANC, and that is between those who think that in theory you should respect the courts, and those who think that the courts really are just another colonial invention, like money, the wheel, universities, and so on. All things that I've heard being described as white mischief. That the court's just another instance of white mischief, not to be trusted or taken seriously. And so if someone applies to the court to overturn you, then that's more of that. Anyway, so I think Aaron Motsoaledi is committing himself to the Sisulu anti-constitutional side of things. Which also
very much seems
as disturbing, as you were saying. Yeah.
All right. So very briefly for our last story, we should talk a little bit about the new ANC chairperson in Gauteng, and this is, of course, Panyaza Lesufi, who is, I believe, still the MEC for Education in Gauteng. He's a controversial figure, to say the least. He has some people who love him and a lot of people who are very strong critics of his, and I think we are definitely in that latter camp. Sholan, what do you make of Panyaza Lesufi? Do you think he could be a bigger player in the ANC with his elevation in the Gauteng province?
Yeah, so I will definitely say that, Lesufi is one of those politicians who I think are professional race baiters. They know exactly how to stoke division in order to gain relevance. But I will also say that I do not think that his rise is any mistake or something like that, because I think so far he has quite proven, it's no mistake, becoming the ANC Gauteng leader, the provincial leader in that region. That's no mistake. You must be obviously professional at politicking and contesting for power. But I will also just raise my concern, I actually want to hear you guys' thoughts on this one as well, is that, he is currently taking the reins of a position I do not really think anybody wants as the ANC leader in the province, because as the ANC's dominance is currently waning, and, does he really want to be ANC leader? Because first, come the 2024 elections, he can be touted and be seen as the one who, raise the ANC out of the ashes as they are busy losing the province in centers of power like Ekurhuleni and Tshwane and the city of Joburg. Or the alternative is you will be actually the poster boy for ANC failure. So I'm really not sure whether or not these national prospects, will actually be helped by the ANC's losing this province, as they most likely were to a coalition government come 2024. So I really don't think that this is really helpful for his image. But I might be wrong. That's why I'm really willing to hear you guys' thoughts on that one.
Very briefly, Gabriel, your thoughts.
Sholan, I think that's a very astute observation.
Yeah.
My favorite anecdote about Panyaza Lesufi is the time he went to the wrong province to fire the wrong teacher on a false allegation of racism. He had no business in Northwest Province, Trizerenica, but he went there anyway, and he fired the wrong teacher. He had no power, but he said anyway. He's a meddlesome man, and there really are not many politicians I'd go so far as to say that about. I think that insofar as this fits a broader pattern, it is of the ANC trying harder and harder to dig into its backbenchers in order to find new, fresh blood, fresh faces to take it forward into the next election, not successfully finding people with the great charisma to boost its chances. But I think what it's better at doing is finding people who are less likely to be personally corrupt, but more likely to be ideologically deranged.
No, that's it. I like that a lot. All right, we are unfortunately out of time, but thank you very much, gentlemen, for being on the show today. I apologize to the audience if I was a little bit off my game, but I'm sure I'll be back in fine form soon. And otherwise, everyone have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow on the Daily Friend Show. Cheers.